They called me greedy. After I kept them alive. After I poured every cent, every ounce of energy, every sacrifice into making sure they had food on their plates, clothes on their backs, and a roof over their heads. Greedy. That word still rings in my ears like a curse. I was the one who skipped meals so they could eat, the one who worked overtime shifts until my body ached, the one who paid their debts when collectors came pounding on the door. And when I finally, just once, said I couldn't give more. When I begged them to stand on their own feet. They didn't thank me. They didn't stand beside me. They turned. They twisted every sacrifice into suspicion, every act of love into leverage, and branded me the villain. Greedy. As if I'd stolen from them, instead of saving them. As if the years I gave away meant nothing at all. Before we dive into the story, tell me in the comments which country you're watching this from. I love seeing how far these stories travel, and it helps me connect with you all around the world. My name is Rachel, 32 years old, female, senior forensic accountant. My entire career revolves around chasing money trails, exposing lies hidden in numbers, catching fraudsters who think they're too clever to be caught. But nothing at work could have prepared me for the fraud happening under my own roof. It began slowly, almost invisibly. In 2017, my father collapsed one morning in the kitchen, stroke. Half his body failed him, and in the same instant, half the household's income disappeared. I was just 24, barely out of university, still clawing my way up in an accounting firm. But suddenly, I was more than a daughter, I was the lifeline. Bills piled high, hospital fees mounting by the hour. I drained my savings, worked overtime, and told myself, this is temporary, things will settle. But they didn't settle. Once you become the rescuer, you never stop. My younger brother, Mark, failed a semester at university and said he just needed one more chance. My Aunt Linda's bakery oven broke during the holiday rush. She insisted her whole business would collapse without my help. My cousin begged for a bridge loan to cover his rent after losing yet another job. I paid, every time. And every time, they promised, just until things stabilize. We'll pay you back. But stability never came. Repayments never came. Only more requests. By 2019, I earned a promotion to senior associate. More pay, more hours, more responsibility. And with every increase in my paycheck, their expectations grew louder. They treated my salary as though it belonged to the family, not me. My phone became a siren of need, calls at midnight, desperate texts, guilt-laced voice notes. I created a private notebook, writing down every loan, every bill, every temporary rescue. Pages filled with dates and amounts. Not to shame them, but to keep myself sane. Because without evidence, even I started doubting what I'd given. Then the pandemic hit in 2020. While the world slowed down, my workload exploded. Companies bled money, audits multiplied, and I spent 16 hours a day in front of my laptop tracing corporate fraud. My family didn't ease up. If anything, their demands sharpened. Remote schooling meant laptops, I bought them. Lockdowns meant stocking pantries, I filled them. Hospitals meant testing fees, I covered them. It was as if my entire purpose was to absorb every crisis, until my own life barely existed. But everything changed in April 2023. My firm offered me the role of lead investigator on a major regional case, a career-defining promotion. The pay increase was substantial. For the first time in years, I let myself imagine a different future. A small house with natural light, a savings account untouched by endless demands. A life that was mine. 2 days later, Mark texted, "Need help, urgent. Tuition. Rent. Just this once." I stared at my neatly planned budget and, for the first time in 8 years, I said no. Not forever. Just not this month. The silence was suffocating. Then came the reply, "You always say family first. Guess money matters more to you now." A week later, I sat at my mother's dining table, Sunday, 7:18 p.m. The old ceiling light flickered overhead. She fiddled with a napkin while Mark slid his phone across the table. The family group chat was open. Messages scrolled like bullets. "Rachel's salary is high, but she counts every cent. Real generosity isn't written in notebooks. She's not the same anymore." Then, glowing on the screen, a single word, "greedy." I froze. My mother didn't defend me. She looked at me and asked quietly, "You haven't been keeping extra, have you?" As if my savings were betrayal. As if years of sacrifice meant nothing. I opened my notebook, pages curled at the edges, and read aloud, June 3, 2018, Mark's tuition. October 29, 2019, bakery repairs. February 14, 2020, hospital bills. May 1, 2021, cousin's bridge loan. August 16, 2022, rent deposit. January 5, 2023, school supplies. Each entry landed like a hammer on the table. I thought evidence would silence them. Instead, Mark smirked. "What do you want, Rachel? A receipt for love?" And in that moment, I realized, my family hadn't just taken my money. They had turned me into the villain of their story. The week after they labeled me greedy, the requests didn't slow, they multiplied. Need has a way of smelling hesitation. Monday, 8:12 a.m. A text from cousin Tyler. Short-term boost for the shop, sales dip every winter, just a few weeks. 10 minutes later, Aunt Linda, oven relay failed again, repair guy wants cash. Noon, mom forwards a photo of the utility bill, no comment, just the number like a dare. By dusk, Mark is on my doorstep, hands in pockets, voice soft, they're threatening to drop me from the semester list, fees tonight or I'm out. It wasn't survival anymore, it was ritual. A liturgy of emergencies, repeated until meaning drained away. I didn't hand over an answer. For the first time in 8 years. I paused. I pulled out the spiral notebook, edges feathered from use, and I opened my banking app beside it. Page after page, line after line, the truth assembled itself: tuition transfers, cash top-ups, rent deposits, pharmacy runs I barely remembered until the amounts jogged me. No single blow, just a leak that never stopped. When I tallied, the sum startled me. If you stripped out the holidays and the one-off crises, the help still came to more than half my take-home across multiple years. I stared at that number and felt something tilt inside me. I don't mind bleeding for family, I thought. I mind hemorrhaging. At work I build evidence stacks, time-stamped emails, reconciled ledgers, phone logs cross-referenced with card swipes. So I did the same at home. I printed bank statements and highlighted recurring patterns, monthly withdrawals right after payday that matched their emergencies, cash transfers that always landed just before someone posted a weekend photo in a new jacket. I exported the family group thread, preserving the timestamps, snarky messages on the very afternoons I'd paid their bills. I saved voice notes to a dedicated folder, renamed only by date and sender, because memory softens, recordings don't. I didn't want vengeance, I wanted clarity. A chain of custody for my sanity. Tuesday, the whispers got teeth. In the chat, some people measure love in spreadsheets. Followed by a prayer hands emoji, then a smirking face. A minute later, would be nice if certain professionals remembered who fed them when they were small. The insinuation was absurd, mom fed me, yes, but now I fed everyone. I took screenshots, cropped nothing, annotated nothing. Let their words sit with their timestamps. Evidence breathes best when untouched. Wednesday, Mark called from a blocked number, says his phone plan lapsed because I forgot to spot him. I told him I hadn't forgotten, I was choosing. He went quiet, then soft. Do you really want the family to think you've turned cold? There it was, the cudgel. Not need, not gratitude, reputation. I pictured the stories forming without me, the half-truths lacquered into legend. I said, evenly, if they're going to talk, they can talk with facts. He hung up. 2 minutes later a cousin posted a meme, a woman guarding a treasure chest labeled pennies, while her family stands outside in the rain. I saved that, too. Thursday, mom called late. She always calls late when she wants me pliable. I hate asking, she whispered, but the medication copay. I closed my eyes. Some requests were real, some habitual, I could tell the difference by the way my stomach dropped. I'll cover your meds, I said, but I'm not paying Mark's tuition this month. She exhaled, unhappy, a disappointed teacher. You know how shameful it is for him to be cut from classes? I didn't say it, but I thought, shame is a poor accountant, it charges the wrong person. By Friday, I had a neat folder on my desktop labeled Family Ledger, bank PDFs, screenshots, a few clipped photos of receipts they'd texted me in the past, edges shadowed by kitchen lighting. I created a simple timeline, left column, their requests, right column, my transfers, a middle column for what followed, new shoes, dinners out, weekend trips that didn't cost much. If this were a client case, I'd have drafted a findings memo already. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table, coffee gone cold, and questioned my complicity. Had I made them dependent, or had they made me forget I was allowed to stop? Saturday afternoon I met Mark at a coffee shop 2 blocks from Mom's. He wore the one blazer I'd bought him for interviews, sleeves slightly too long, trying to look worthy of the ask. Look, he said, leaning in, lowering his voice like we were plotting a crime, I've talked to everyone. People feel hurt. You built your life on family sacrifices, Rachel. Is it really fair to pull the ladder up now? The line was polished, he'd rehearsed it. I sipped my coffee and let the silence work. I didn't pull the ladder, I said. I climbed it, and I've been hauling you all one by one. Maybe it's your turn to step. He smiled then, small and hard. You always were. Clever with money. The same phrasing Aunt Linda used, like cleverness itself was suspicious. I thought of my cases, how the guilty float words like clever, cold, calculating to recast discipline as deceit. I stood to leave. He added, lightly, people listen to me, you know. I can calm this down, or not. A threat wrapped as brotherly concern. I heard it. I logged it. Saturday night, 11:06 p.m. A new thread, money as a test. Some people fail. A chorus of amens. Then a private message from Mom, sweetheart, they're upset. Can you post something nice, say you're grateful? Grateful. I typed and erased 3 replies. In the end I wrote, I love my family. I won't discuss money in a group chat. Neutral. Boring. True. Within seconds, a cousin replied publicly, silence speaks volumes. I took another screenshot, dragged it to the folder, and closed my phone like it burned. By Sunday morning, I felt it in my bones, their need wasn't a well at all. It was a siphon, quiet, mechanical, relentless. You don't notice a siphon until the tank runs low. I stood by my window, city light flickering across the glass, and made a decision I had avoided for years. There would be rules. Clear, written, enforceable, just like the policies I audit. No cash without documentation of purpose. No repeats without proof of progress. And most of all, no more emergencies that look exactly like last month's emergencies, if they called that greed. Fine. I would accept the verdict and build my case anyway. Because the bottomless well was a story they told to keep me pouring. And I was done being the source. Accusations rarely arrive in thunder. They seep in as whispers, half jokes, muttered comments, words sharpened just enough to sting but not enough to be called an attack. That's how it started with my family. The narrative of Rachel the provider began quietly shifting into Rachel the villain. It was a Wednesday afternoon when the first real sign appeared. I was buried in a corporate fraud case at work when my phone lit up with a string of messages from the family group chat. At first it was the usual clutter, photos of meals, a cousin's new puppy, an uncle forwarding a motivational quote. But then I saw it, tucked in the middle, funny how some people forget where they came from once their paycheck grows. A few laughing emojis followed. No one named me, but they didn't have to. Everyone knew. That night, I confronted my brother Mark. He shrugged, playing innocent. It's just a joke. Don't be so sensitive. Sensitive. That word cut deeper than greedy. Because it turned my very real exhaustion into a flaw. It told me my feelings weren't valid, that I was imagining insults where none existed. It was gaslighting, plain and simple. The next morning, my Aunt Linda stopped me outside her bakery. She lowered her voice, eyes darting around the street. Your mother mentioned you've been saving a lot lately. People are wondering why you're keeping so much hidden. Is it true? Hidden? As if my modest savings account was a secret vault. As if wanting stability was a betrayal. I told her no, I wasn't hiding anything. She clicked her tongue, lips pursed, and said, you always were clever with numbers. Too clever, maybe. That phrase, too clever, stuck with me all day. I'd heard it before, but always in a professional context. Fraudsters use it when cornered, too clever with paperwork, too clever with receipts. It was a way of turning skill into suspicion. And now my family was using it against me. By Friday, the group chat was humming with passive-aggressive commentary. One cousin posted a meme of a woman clutching a giant piggy bank while her family stood outside in the rain. The caption, some people would rather count pennies than count blessings. The likes stacked up instantly. I screenshotted everything, dragging each file into the folder I had begun building on my computer, Family Ledger. I wasn't saving them to retaliate. Not yet. But my instincts told me, they were laying groundwork. Building a narrative. And if I didn't build mine, I'd be swallowed whole. Then came the moment that shattered me. My mother, my own mother, said it directly. We were in her kitchen, side by side washing dishes. She sighed and muttered, almost casually, your cousins are saying you've opened a secret account. Rachel. You wouldn't keep something from us, would you? My hands froze in the soapy water. My jaw locked. A secret account? I asked. Do you really believe that? She didn't answer. She just looked away. That silence said everything. For years, I had broken myself to keep her comfortable. And in a single moment, she treated me like a suspect. Not a daughter. Not a savior. A suspect. That weekend, Mark called again. His tone was calm, almost rehearsed. Look, Rachel, people are talking. They say you don't trust us. They say you think we're parasites. If you don't fix this, it's going to look really bad. My blood ran cold. Look bad? For whom? For me, the one who had been carrying everyone? Or for them, who were now rewriting history to justify bleeding me dry? I said nothing. I just listened. He mistook my silence for guilt. All you have to do, he added, is be generous again. Then everyone will stop asking questions. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't about money anymore. It was about control. They needed me guilty, of greed, of secrecy, of betrayal, because if I wasn't the villain, then they had no excuse for draining me. At work, I exposed corruption with time-stamped emails, falsified invoices, mismatched ledgers. At home, the same tricks were being used against me. The whispers were no longer whispers. They were shaping into accusations, louder, sharper, harder to ignore. And for the first time in my life, I realized I wasn't just part of a family anymore. I was on trial. And the suspect was me. The line between family and parasite isn't a line at all. It's a fog. You don't see it until you're already inside it, breathing it, swallowing it, calling it love because you don't have another word that doesn't make you feel cruel. After the first accusations, I stopped defending myself and started documenting them. Not out of spite, out of survival. If they were going to make a case against me, I would make a better one. With receipts, timestamps, and a trail even the softest denial couldn't smudge. I wrote rules, simple, fair, generous even, no cash without a documented purpose, no repeats without proof of progress, no tuition without transcripts, no emergencies that look exactly like last month's emergencies. I emailed the guidelines to the family thread, calm wording, no blame, a boundary disguised as policy. I thought the structure might help. It did the opposite. Within minutes, the replies came in waves. So we're clients now? You want us to beg with paperwork? Rachel's turned corporate, over a few dollars. A cousin posted a selfie with the caption, "Love isn't an invoice." My phone rattled like a tin roof in a storm. So I did what I'm trained to do, I traced what they called need. Mark's urgent tuition crisis? His public posts didn't lie, photos geotagged at a sports bar the night before the fee deadline, a tagged story at an electronics store 2 days earlier, new headphones balanced on his collarbone. Aunt Linda's equipment emergency? A bank transfer I'd made last month was followed, same afternoon, by her daughter's weekend trip photos, beach chair, new luggage, a caption that read, "Finally treating myself. I'm not a miser, I'm not heartless. I'm a professional who understands leakage." Money meant for necessity was sliding into vanity, and my refusal to subsidize it had become the moral offense. When I confronted Mark, quietly, privately, he smiled that stretched, practiced smile and said, "You're stalking my life now." I kept my voice even. "I'm reconciling claims to behavior. That's my job." He leaned back, arms crossed. "You do realize everyone thinks you're obsessed with control." I did not say, "Control is the scaffolding you build when chaos keeps demanding rent." I did not say, "You weaponized my love and called it culture." I said, "Show me a transcript, and I'll pay. Show me a plan, and I'll invest." He scoffed, as if accountability were an insult. Mom called that night. She sounded older than she is, the fatigue threaded between words. "Honey. The rules are humiliating. We're not strangers." I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at my shoes. "I'm not trying to humiliate anyone," I said. "I'm trying to stop drowning." She went quiet, then whispered, "You talk like a judge now." That landed heavier than I expected. I wanted to be a daughter again. But daughters who set terms are rarely welcomed back as daughters. The next 48 hours turned into a pressure cooker, low heat, sealed lid, the kind of slow boil that makes metal scream. In the group chat, Rachel's gatekeeping money she made because we supported her in school. Supported? I paid my own loans, quietly, painfully, over years. Rachel hoards cash while her brother starves. Starves? I had groceries delivered to Mark last week. The delivery timestamp sat beside a photo he'd posted the same evening. Takeout containers from a place that charges more for a burger than I spend on dinner for two. I didn't argue. I compiled. I matched claims to records. I built my map of the fog. Saturday, I tried a different tack, an offer with terms. I proposed paying one final semester for Mark on 3 conditions: documented enrollment, proof of attendance, and a part-time job within 30 days. I would even help him craft a resume, coach interviews, connect him with colleagues willing to refer. He stared at the email, then texted one word: insulting. As if my structure were violence. As if his endless withdrawals were not. And then, because there's always a rumor surfaced that I had bought a condo and kept it secret. The post came from a cousin who lives on insinuation. I hadn't bought anything. I'd toured a unit with a realtor, one appointment, one set of listing photos in my camera roll, and then stepped back because the math, in this climate, didn't justify it. But the story had legs, and rumors run faster than clarifications ever will. I checked the thread. Someone wrote, "She's investing while we struggle," and the chorus answered with sighs and sarcasm. I closed the chat, opened my family ledger folder, and added a note: condo rumor, origin, Tyler, amplification, Mark, liked plus comment, Linda, heart emoji. What snapped me in two wasn't the slander. It was the inversion. In corporate investigations, the taker pretends to be the victim. I had no choice, the system is unfair, I deserve this. My family wore that mask perfectly. And I realized, with a sick twist, that I had enabled the costume department, funded it, in fact. Every time I paid without conditions, I sewed another thread into it. I spent Sunday morning drafting a final message, measured, unemotional, the kind of note I could live with if I had to read it in court someday. I affirmed love. I affirmed history. I affirmed help, structured, accountable, real. I also set a boundary: without documentation, there would be no more transfers. I pressed send and felt hollow, but grounded. A minute later, the responses: heat, fury, theatrics. Blood before paper. You're not one of us anymore. Enjoy your money. Then, typed by Mark, liked by nearly everyone: if Rachel wants to treat us like audit subjects, fine. Let's audit her. Audit me? Good. Audit me. I keep clean books. But a line in his message lodged like a splinter: we'll see what the truth really looks like. Not a bluff, an intention. And in that moment, I knew this wasn't just a family squabble. This was the beginning of a campaign, organized, coordinated, ugly. The fog was thickening on purpose. Family or parasites? The question isn't philosophical, it's procedural. You discover the answer by testing flows, confirming narratives, forcing reality to sit beside records. So I tightened my ponytail, opened a fresh document labeled Timeline, Household Claims versus Public Activity, and began the kind of work I do best: relentless, quiet, unhurried. Because if they wanted an audit, they would get one. And not just mine. By dusk, I had something like a map, and one glaring anomaly pulsing at its center. A date, a charge, a post. That didn't match. Proof, maybe. A seam, definitely. I stared at it, stomach tight, and felt the first true tremor of what would come next. Not mercy. Not more rules. An investigation. And beneath it, a trap. Every story of betrayal has a moment where you stop being surprised. That's when you know you've hit the breaking point, not because the cruelty is worse than before, but because it's predictable. Because you realize they've rehearsed it so long, it's become second nature. Mine came on a Thursday evening, after one of the longest days of my career. I just closed a corporate investigation, weeks of data trails, forged invoices, falsified signatures. We'd confirmed the fraud, delivered the report, and my boss congratulated me with the kind of smile that says, "Your career is about to change." I should have celebrated. I should have bought myself a glass of wine and let the victory sink in. Instead, my phone buzzed before it even left the office. It was my mother. "Rachel, they're saying you've been hiding money from the family. They say you have accounts we don't know about." I stood frozen in the lobby, my briefcase hanging heavy at my side. They. Always they. Never names. Never accountability. Just a vague, shadowy tribunal of relatives who had nothing better to do than shred me. I asked her directly, my voice low, "Do you believe that?" Silence. Then, a sigh. "It's hard not to wonder sometimes. You're always so secretive." Secretive? I had given them everything: rent, tuition, bills, medical costs, groceries. I had shared more of my finances with my family than I had with anyone else in my life. The only thing I'd kept for myself was a modest savings account. And somehow, that had become proof of betrayal. By the time I got home, the group chat was on fire. Dozens of messages, most of them vague but pointed. Some people hoard while others starve. It must be nice to sit on a pile of money while your brother struggles. One cousin even posted a screenshot of a real estate listing. My name wasn't on it, but the implication was clear: Rachel's secretly buying property while ignoring her family. Mark chimed in, pretending to be diplomatic: "I'm not saying Rachel doesn't care. I just think if she's planning big moves, she could have been honest with us first." Honest? As though I owed them a board meeting before making a personal decision. That was the moment something inside me cracked. Not bent, cracked. Because it wasn't just about money anymore. It was about narrative. They weren't just asking for help. They were rewriting the story of who I was, casting me as the selfish one, the traitor, the greedy accountant hiding stacks of cash while they suffered. And the worst part? My mother wasn't stopping them. She was letting it spread. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed, laptop open, the family ledger folder glowing on my desktop. Bank statements. Screenshots, messages. Audio clips. A mountain of proof. At work, this evidence would be enough to convict a CEO. But here, I wasn't sure it would matter. Because my family didn't want truth. They wanted a scapegoat. Still, I compiled everything. I created a master timeline. Left column, their requests. Middle column, my transfers. Right column, their behavior afterward. The pattern was undeniable. Tuition emergencies followed by bar nights. Rent crises followed by shopping sprees. Medical bills followed by vacations. I stared at the timeline until my eyes blurred, then printed it, 20 pages, double-sided, stapled at the top. I placed it on my kitchen table like a case file. And I whispered to myself, if they want an audit, I'll give them one. The real breaking point came 3 days later. A family dinner at my mother's house. I almost didn't go, but guilt, habitual, crushing guilt, drove me there. The moment I walked in, I felt the shift. Conversations hushed. Eyes followed me. Plates clattered harder than necessary. Finally, Mark cleared his throat and said, too loudly, we all just want to understand why Rachel has money for herself but not for us. My hands shook under the table. Do you want to see exactly where my money has gone? I asked. He smirked. What, you have receipts? Yes. I did. I had 20 pages of receipts. But I didn't pull them out, not yet. Because in that moment, I understood something chilling. Evidence wouldn't save me here. Evidence wasn't the language they spoke. Guilt was. Obligation was. And no matter how much proof I carried, they'd twist it into selfishness. I left the dinner early, heart pounding. On the drive home, I realized this was no longer about boundaries. It wasn't even about money. It was about power. They wanted me on the defensive forever, apologizing, explaining, proving my innocence again and again. And that was the breaking point. Not the accusations themselves, but the clarity. I saw the system for what it was. And once you see the system, you can dismantle it. That night, I opened a blank document. At the top, I typed 4 words, Operation Full Exposure Begins. Because if they were going to put me on trial, I was going to make sure the world saw the evidence. I've spent my career digging through corporate lies, tracing missing invoices, identifying forged signatures, connecting timestamps across thousands of emails. But nothing compared to the excavation I was about to perform on my own family. If they wanted to treat me like a criminal, I would treat them like subjects of an investigation. And this time, there would be no hiding behind sentiment. I began with what I already had, 8 years of transfers logged in my spiral notebook, backed by screenshots of bank apps and receipts they'd texted me. I laid them out on the floor of my apartment, pages, screenshots, and sticky notes covering every square inch like evidence boards in a detective's office. I built a timeline stretching across years. It looked less like generosity and more like a siphoning operation. Patterns emerged instantly. Mark's tuition deadlines always urgent, always last minute, lined up with social media posts showing him out drinking or buying electronics days before. Linda's bakery equipment failures coincided with photos of her daughter on weekend getaways. Tyler's rent crises happened suspiciously often right after online shopping splurges he bragged about. The pattern was too perfect. Emergencies weren't emergencies, they were excuses. I dug deeper. Using my forensic training, I started pulling metadata from the files they'd sent me over the years. A scanned urgent invoice from the bakery? Its digital header revealed it had been created 3 months earlier, then edited the night before she sent it. A photo of a utility bill from Mark? The shadows in the corner betrayed that it was printed, staged, and photographed, not an original. They weren't just manipulating me emotionally. They were fabricating evidence. That realization nearly made me sick. These weren't desperate cries for help. These were rehearsed plays, scripted for maximum impact. I spent nights cross-referencing transfers with their online footprints. Every payment I made had a twin, a night out, a shopping spree, a holiday. I didn't have to stalk them, they documented it all themselves, proudly, on Instagram and Facebook. Public posts timestamped within hours of my transfers. It was like watching my own money dance in someone else's hands. But the real breakthrough came one Saturday afternoon when I decided to test a hunch. I searched my email archives for phrases like urgent and emergency. Sure enough, the same wording appeared again and again, word for word identical, copied across years, only the dollar amounts changed. Mark's urgent tuition reminder in 2023 was almost identical to his urgent tuition reminder in 2020. Linda's emergency oven repair had the same phrasing in 2 separate years, down to the typo and immediately. They weren't even improvising anymore. They had a script. I created a side document, Family Request Playbook. Each recurring phrase got its own bullet point. I logged how often it appeared, who used it, and what I paid. The repetition was damning. Even without names, anyone reading it would see the manipulation instantly. By midweek, I had enough to build a formal case file. I structured it like a corporate fraud report. Executive summary: years of financial exploitation framed as family obligation. Key findings: fabricated invoices, repeated emergency scripts, misuse of funds. Evidence: screenshots, metadata, bank statements, public social media posts. Conclusion: coordinated exploitation disguised as familial need. I didn't just have suspicion anymore. I had proof. But proof wasn't enough, not yet. Because evidence without exposure is just paper. And if I revealed my hand too early, they'd twist it the way they twisted everything else. I needed a strategy. A trap. Something that would leave no room for denial. So I tested them. I crafted a controlled experiment. I told the family group chat I had received a small work bonus, enough to cover one more round of emergencies. Then I sat back and waited. Within hours, the floodgates opened. Mark, finally, this is the sign I needed. Registration closes tomorrow, help me cover it. Linda, the oven's been limping along, one last repair would save us. Tyler, my landlord's being unreasonable again, please Rachel. The script played out exactly as I predicted. But here's the catch, I hadn't received any bonus. Instead, I tracked their responses, compared them against old requests, and flagged the recycled excuses. Same wording. Same urgency. Same performance. They weren't asking. They were acting. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, surrounded by pages of their lies, and realized the truth in full. My family wasn't just leaning on me. They weren't just entitled. They were running an operation, an informal fraud ring dressed up as family need. And I had built the evidence to prove it. For the first time in years, I didn't feel drained. I felt something else entirely. Cold. Focused. Ready. Because the investigation wasn't the end. It was the beginning. The truth wasn't just meant to be uncovered. It was meant to be weaponized. The thing about liars is they don't expect to be caught, especially when they're lying to someone who loves them. They believe love blinds you, that guilt keeps you obedient, that silence means surrender. My family had lived on that assumption for years. What they didn't realize was that love hadn't blinded me, it had trained me. I knew every script, every recycled excuse, every pressure tactic. And I was done playing defense. It was time to expose them. I began by organizing my evidence like a prosecutor preparing for trial. The family request playbook I'd compiled was damning. Identical emergency messages copied and pasted across years, fabricated invoices with metadata proving they'd been altered, social media posts showing how my transfers funded luxuries instead of needs. But raw data alone wasn't enough. I needed a presentation, a narrative even they couldn't twist. So I built what I do best, a case file. On my laptop, I designed a polished slide deck, each page a hammer blow. One side showed their desperate requests, the other side, the truth. Example: Mark's urgent tuition plea, April 2023. Beside his Instagram story from the same day, beer glass raised in a crowded bar. Linda's oven repair crisis beside her daughter's weekend vacation photos. Tyler's eviction notice beside his online shopping receipt dated the same afternoon. Slide after slide, request versus reality, plea versus indulgence. But I didn't stop there. I pulled audio recordings, voice notes I had saved when they begged for help. I spliced them with screenshots of their social media posts from the same hours. Hearing their trembling voices asking me to save them, followed by images of expensive meals and new gadgets. It was devastating. Still, evidence needed an audience. And my family wasn't going to give me a fair trial. If I handed it to them directly, they'd shout me down, twist my motives, drown me in guilt until my proof looked like cruelty. So I needed a credible vector, someone outside the family with authority and reach. I thought about going to a lawyer, but this wasn't about legal damages. It was about narrative. About who owned the story. That's when I reached out to Elaine, a journalist I'd once worked with on a corporate whistleblower case. She specialized in stories about financial exploitation and manipulation, and she had an audience that believed her. I sent her a discreet email, not corporate. Personal. Years of financial exploitation disguised as family obligation. I have evidence. Interested? Her reply came within an hour, always. Show me what you've got. For 3 nights, I walked her through the evidence. We spoke in encrypted calls, I sent her the sanitized files, no unnecessary personal identifiers, just the proof of exploitation, and I told her my story in painstaking detail. She was horrified, but also fascinated. You know what this is, Rachel? She said on the 3rd call. This isn't just family drama. This is a case study in systemic financial abuse. People will relate to this. That was exactly what I needed, relatability. If my family tried to dismiss me, the public wouldn't. Meanwhile, I set the stage for the confrontation. I told the family I wanted to clear the air and proposed a meeting at my mother's house. Predictably, they agreed. It was the perfect setting for them to corner me, shame me, put me back in my place. What they didn't know was that I had invited Elaine as a friend sitting in. Not as a journalist. Not yet. Just an observer. The night of the meeting, I carried a slim binder under my arm. Inside was a printed version of my case file, the slide deck, the timeline, the screenshots. I didn't plan to slam it on the table right away. I wanted them to talk first. To incriminate themselves. To hang themselves with their own words. And oh, did they oblige. Within minutes, the accusations started flying. Mark, with his arms folded, sneering, Rachel has more money than she admits. She hides it from us. Linda, shaking her head, she counts every cent like we're beggars. That's not family. My mother, her voice trembling, I just want to know why you've turned so cold. I let them talk. I recorded every word. I watched Elaine, sitting quietly in the corner, jotting notes. And then, when the room was thick with self-righteousness, I opened the binder. Page by page, I laid out the evidence. Mark's pleas beside his bar photos. Linda's emergency beside her daughter's vacation selfies. Tyler's rent crisis beside his purchase confirmation. Their words against their actions. Their guilt trips against hard proof. The room went silent except for the sound of paper flipping. Mark tried to laugh it off. This is crazy, you're spying on us. Linda called it an invasion of privacy. My mother whispered my name like a warning. But the evidence was undeniable. Even if they screamed, even if they denied, the pages were there. And Elaine was there. Watching. Documenting. For the first time in years, I saw fear in their eyes, not fear of losing money, but fear of losing control of the narrative. And I knew, in that moment, the trap had been set. There's a sound people make when the walls close in, not a scream, not a shout, but a brittle silence, like glass about to crack. That's what filled the room after I laid out the binder. 20 pages of evidence spread across my mother's dining table, their pleas and fabrications side by side. For years, I had been the one on trial. But that night, the prosecution changed seats. Mark was the first to recover. He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, smirk plastered on his face. You've really lost it, Rachel. Collecting our messages like a stalker? Printing screenshots like a crazy person? His words were sharp, but his eyes flickered, just enough for me to know he recognized the danger. Linda wasn't as composed. She flipped through one of the pages, hands trembling, until she reached the side-by-side comparison of her emergency oven repair and her daughter's beach trip. Her face flushed crimson. This is taken out of context. You don't know what was happening that week. I looked her in the eye. What was happening is you asked me for money to repair a bakery oven, and then your daughter posted vacation selfies the same day I sent it. The context is your own evidence. The silence was suffocating. That's when Elaine spoke. Calm, even, measured. I've been sitting here quietly because I wanted to observe. But now I need to be transparent. I'm a journalist. I cover stories of financial abuse. And what I've seen here tonight is a textbook case. The room erupted. My mother gasped. Mark shot to his feet. Linda sputtered, You brought a stranger here? A reporter? Elaine didn't flinch. Not just a reporter. A witness. Rachel has documented everything. And if this continues, the story won't stay in this room. That was the moment I watched the balance of power shift. For years, they had weaponized shame, banking on the fact that I'd never exposed them. But with Elaine sitting there, pen poised, their tactics collapsed. Guilt only works in shadows. Under light, it withers. Mark tried one last attack. Rachel, you'd really drag your own family through the mud for money? I leaned forward, my voice steady. No, Mark. For truth. For the years you drained me, lied to me, turned me into a villain. This isn't about money anymore, it's about accountability. He opened his mouth to argue but found nothing. Because what could he say? Every plea, every fabrication, every lie was already on the table. For the first time in my life, my mother didn't rush to defend him. She looked down at the papers, her lips pressed thin, eyes glassy. She didn't speak, but her silence was louder than any denial. The reckoning didn't end that night. Elaine left with copies of the binder, promising to write the story with or without my family's cooperation. Mark stormed out, slamming the door so hard the frame shook. Linda muttered curses under her breath as she followed him. My mother sat in her chair long after they were gone, staring at the pages as if they were evidence of a stranger's betrayal. But the truth had been released. There was no pulling it back. The fallout was swift. Within a week, whispers started circulating, not about me, but about them. Neighbors asked questions. Old friends sent me private messages. I always wondered how you managed to support everyone. Elaine's article hadn't even published yet, but the story had already spread. Shame is contagious when it attaches to the guilty. Mark called 2 weeks later, voice frantic. You need to tell Elaine to kill the story. This will ruin me. You'll regret this. I listened in silence, then replied, I already regret 8 years of silence. That regret is over. I hung up before he could respond. Linda tried another tactic, bargaining. If you withdraw the evidence, I'll pay back some of what I owe. Some. Not all. Not accountability, just desperation. I told her flatly, keep it. It's already too late. And my mother? She didn't call. She didn't text. She didn't defend me anymore, but she also didn't accuse me. For her, the reckoning was different. It was the slow dawning realization that silence makes you complicit. That by letting them drain me, she had betrayed me too. The reckoning wasn't loud. It wasn't cinematic shouting matches or slam doors. It was quieter, heavier, more suffocating. It was the look in their eyes when they realized the roles had flipped, when they saw I was no longer their source, their scapegoat, their endless well. For years, I had carried the weight of everyone's needs. Now, I was placing it back in their hands. And whether they collapsed under it or stood tall, that was no longer my problem. After the reckoning, there wasn't an explosion. No screaming matches spilling into the street, no dramatic disowning broadcast for the neighborhood to hear. What followed instead was silence, the kind of silence that feels heavier than noise, a silence that lingers like smoke after a fire. The family group chat went dark. For years, it had been a constant stream of requests, complaints, little jokes at my expense, manipulative memes. Now? Nothing. Days passed without a single ping. I didn't delete the app, I wanted to watch the quiet unfold. And it did, like a stage emptied after the curtain falls. At first, the silence unnerved me. I'd grown used to the endless chorus of demands. Even when I hated it, it anchored me. Without it, I felt a strange kind of vertigo, like I'd stepped off a treadmill that had been running for so long my legs forgot how to stand still. But then I realized, silence was its own kind of victory. It meant they weren't asking. They weren't demanding. They weren't twisting my words. They weren't turning my sacrifices into weapons. For the first time in nearly a decade, my money was mine. My hours were mine. My peace, thin, fragile, but real, was mine. Not everyone disappeared completely. Mark sent 3 texts in the first week. You've humiliated me. I hope you're happy. Mom's ashamed of you. This isn't over. I didn't reply. Not because I didn't have words, but because I finally understood that replying was how the trap worked. Silence was not weakness, it was a wall. Linda called once, voice brittle, Rachel, you've poisoned the family against me. I let her talk until she ran out of steam, then said only, no, Linda. You did that yourself. She hung up. She hasn't called again. My mother was the hardest part. For weeks, she said nothing at all. No calls, no messages. When I finally visited, she sat across from me at the kitchen table, eyes tired, hands folded. She didn't accuse me. She didn't defend me. She just whispered, I don't know how to choose. That hurt more than all the accusations combined. Because she didn't have to choose. She could have stood by truth. Instead, she hovered in the fog, afraid of the light. I left her house that night with a weight I couldn't shake. I hadn't just lost my brother, my aunt, my cousins. I had lost my mother's certainty. And yet, in that silence, something else grew. Freedom. I felt it in small ways first. Opening my banking app and seeing the balance untouched for weeks. Sitting at my desk at work and realizing no one would interrupt with a desperate call. Buying myself a new coat, not extravagant, just warm, and not drowning in guilt. Elaine's article went live 3 weeks later. The headline wasn't about me by name. It was broader: when family becomes a financial trap, the hidden epidemic of exploitation. But anyone who knew us could see the parallels. She anonymized details, but the story of a family siphoning one member dry was unmistakable. The article spread fast. Comments poured in. Hundreds of strangers shared their own versions, their own Rachel stories. For the first time, I wasn't alone. My family tried to dismiss it. Mark posted vague rants about ungrateful relatives. Linda raged about betrayal for attention. But it didn't matter. The narrative wasn't theirs anymore. It belonged to the truth. The silence stretched on. Weeks turned into months. My phone stopped vibrating with guilt. The group chat remained dark. Family dinners happened without me, birthdays passed without invitations. They thought they were punishing me. But every empty notification was a reminder: I was free. Of course, freedom came with loneliness. I won't lie about that. Nights felt colder without the noise, even if that noise had been poison. But I learned to fill the silence with things that weren't demands. Long walks. Books I hadn't touched in years. Friends I had neglected while drowning in obligation. Slowly, the silence stopped feeling like exile and started feeling like space. The storm was over. And in its wake, there was only quiet. Not peace, not yet. But quiet, the first step toward it. Every story needs an ending. Not a clean one, life rarely offers those, but a decisive one. The kind of ending that echoes long after the words are spoken. After months of silence, I knew mine had arrived. It began with an invitation. My mother called one Sunday morning, her voice fragile. "Rachel, can you come by tonight? Everyone will be here. We need to talk." I knew what that meant. Not reconciliation. Not apology. A last-ditch tribunal, one final attempt to bend me back into the shape they wanted. I said yes. That evening, I walked into the house where it all started, the same dining table where I'd first been called greedy. The same flickering light buzzing overhead. Around it sat my family: Mark, arms folded and jaw tight; Linda, lips pursed, her daughter glaring at me like I was a stranger; cousins, restless in their seats; and my mother, hands clasped, eyes downcast. The air felt staged, rehearsed. Mark spoke first. "We've decided this has gone too far. You've embarrassed us. You've humiliated us. You've turned strangers against us with your little story." He leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "It ends tonight. You either recommit to this family, or you walk away forever." For years, that ultimatum would have terrified me. I would have bent, compromised, apologized for sins I never committed. But not now. Not anymore. I placed a small envelope on the table. Inside was a single page, a summary of the financial timeline I had compiled, stripped down to bullet points. No screenshots, no metadata, no exhibits, just the raw numbers. 8 years. Thousands of dollars. Line after line of sacrifices. My handwriting at the bottom: "This is what family cost me." No one moved. No one spoke. They just stared at the page as if it were written in a language they couldn't understand. Finally, I broke the silence. "You called me greedy. You called me cold. You told me love isn't a ledger. But love isn't theft either. Love isn't manipulation. Love isn't draining one person until she has nothing left to give." Linda muttered something about betrayal. Mark scoffed. My mother whispered my name. But I didn't let them interrupt. I kept going, my voice steady, louder than I thought it could be. "I carried you all for 8 years. Every bill, every emergency, every fabricated crisis, you built your lives on my back. And when I finally said no, you didn't thank me. You didn't stand beside me. You turned on me. You branded me the villain so you could keep bleeding me. You thought I'd stay quiet because family means silence. But silence is over." Mark slammed his hand on the table. "So what, this is it? You walk away? You'd rather be right than be family?" I stood, sliding my chair back, and looked each of them in the eye. "Family isn't supposed to be a cage. And I'm not your prisoner anymore." The room erupted. Accusations flew: selfish, cruel, ungrateful. My mother pleaded for calm. But I didn't stay to hear it. I walked to the door, my coat already on my arm, and paused only once. I turned back, not for them, but for me. For the final word I knew would echo long after I was gone. "You called me greedy. Remember that. Because one day, when you need me again, you'll discover the truth. I wasn't greedy. I was generous. And you mistook my generosity for weakness. That mistake is the last one you'll ever make with me. I left the house without looking back. Outside, the night air was cold, sharp, honest. For the first time in years, I breathed freely. The storm was over, the silence had come, and now there was only me. Whole. Unapologetic. Unbroken. And behind me, a family left to choke on the truth.